Joining us on the podcast this week in what's going to be our big preview series here. His name is Erik Skopil. He's with Duck Territory 247 Sports. Erik, it has been good to see you out at the scrums, man. This feels slightly normal again. How bizarre.
Dude, first face-to-face, like with anybody for me, for a really long time from a media perspective this last week or so, actually dating back to Pac-12 Media Day, which you were also at down in Los Angeles. Somehow we didn't cross paths down there. We were on a different floor though. You were like somewhere else. I feel like you're in a different hotel.
You were there in LA?
Yeah. I was in the main press conference room, man. You were up in like some weird. They took the TV guys and radio guys and moved them somewhere weird. I was over in a different building.
Oh, that's so weird. I can't. Yeah, I'm kind of actually really surprised now we didn't cross paths in that way. But well, we did now. I have to say though, just on the COVID note, like. And I think we had talked about this when we were at Oregon availability the other day.
Yeah.
It feels like the year was like a fever dream because like we're sitting there and we're waiting on the players to come out as we always have, like nothing ever happened.
Sure.
Just a weird feeling. And now we're going to get it all back. You know, it's going to come back with a vengeance here next week. So,
well, I'll just credit to Oregon and other schools, I think, for trying to make this as similar as to what it used to be, because there was, my fear going into camp, and you might have shared it a little bit, Andrew, was that they were just going to kill access because of COVID.
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to diminish the impacts because there's certainly still cases. And in fact, Eugene just changed, I think its mask mandate is now back in place. So it's not like this is a nothing, but it would have been somewhat easy to just say, yeah, practice is closed again, guys. And which, by the way, for TV, you guys are kind of in you're in a hairy spot there. I don't know how much we want to I don't know how much we want to go into this because people probably want to hear more about the football stuff, but like you don't get to shoot practice. So you guys aren't even attending practice on the TV side. Those of us that aren't there primarily for video have been attending, but yeah, it's been nice at least to have the normalcy back. I'll say that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'll see where it goes in the next couple of weeks, but at least for now, we can kind of cling to something. We'll cling to football. How about that? This will be how we'll roll this. All right. So I feel like you and I are people that, we've got our takes. We try to keep it professional on well, you more than me on the socials, but like we have our thoughts on what this season's going to be. We'll go 3 hot takes each here of what we think is going to happen, or the 3 hottest takes we have going into the season. 1 for 1. I want you to start. What's your first hot take for this Pac-12 season?
Arizona wins no games.
In conference or just generally?
In conference is what I projected, because they do play, I think, a couple of FCS teams in non-conference. But you look at what is going on in Tucson, and actually from a recruiting perspective, I just want to say this. I do work in the industry. They've done okay down there. Like Jed Fish is doing okay down there. Like it's not bad, but he inherits just a total crap show. I was going to use another term, but I wasn't sure what I was.
Okay, this is an adult podcast.
It's a show. Then I'm going to say hard SH. It is not good down there, and I just wouldn't be surprised if they don't win any games at all in conference play and aren't particularly competitive. I mean, think about the last time we saw them play a football game under Kevin Sutherland was against Arizona State. And I don't remember the final score, but it was very similar to like Oregon against Washington in 2016, where it was like a ton of points to not a lot of points. And it was really ugly. And then the offseason takes place and it gets worse because they make a coaching change. And not only make a coaching change, but basically all their good players leave. So what you're left with is, like, I'll put it this way. We mentioned Pac-12 Media Day. When the Arizona players came out, I didn't know who any of their guys were. Like, that's how little I know about their team.
Yep.
Like, I mean, like, and you probably relate to that too, of like, you see the other schools representatives come out and you know who they are because you follow the conference. We follow the conference as close as anybody. I had no idea who Arizona's representatives were. So that speaks to me just to like, I don't think they're going to be very good. And I don't think they're going to win a conference game. And that's a hot take, but it's my least hot take of the show.
I like that it's the least hot take. That score, by the way, against Arizona State was 70-7. The drubbing that marked the end of the Kevin Sumlin era. I can kind of see it, right? Because I think the Pac-12 this year, maybe more than others, feels like it's a little devoid of like that basement team alongside Arizona. Like, I know there's some thought about like, could that be Oregon State or could that be Colorado maybe this year? But like, I think they're
so much better teams.
That's what I mean. Like, I think like if they're a tier above where Arizona is right now, man. Like, I couldn't tell you Arizona's quarterback situation right now, who's going to be their day one starter. Like there's little pieces of talent. I do agree with you. Like, I think Jed Fish has done a good job trying to like get some juice back at Arizona, like bringing Gronk back and bringing Brewski back and like drawing this NFL parallel and making this a whole, we know how to develop you for the league because this is what we did. Like when I talked to him one-on-one at media day, a lot of his answers went back to his NFL experience, which I thought from a branding and marketing standpoint is smart, because that's how you're going to draw your parallel and say, I've been here. I know it. This is how we'll do it. This is where we'll get you. But that's a long build to establish the trust to do that. So I'm all right. I like where we're starting on the least hot. That's a good 0 level of hot. Where are we right now? We'll say like we're at habanero-ish. We're trying to get to like ghost pepper, Carolina Reaper, baby. Like
that's where we want to go. This was like you go to the chicken wing place and it's like your baseline hot chicken sauce.
Like the Wild Wings hot is like where we're starting right now.
Right.
All right. I don't know how hot this one's going to be, but I actually think Utah's a very credible dark horse to win this conference this year. And I think they might be one of my favorites. Like I have Oregon up there for sure. I think Oregon just talent-wise on paper, I think they have everything that you want in a conference champion. They've been there before. I think there's plenty of motivation among that group of players too about what happened last year and the way it ended and the way they got very embarrassed by that Iowa State team in the Fiesta Bowl, and just the way the Cyclones just kind of punched them and punched them and punched them and punched them. Like it seems, at least, I don't know about the guys you've talked to, but like among a couple of folks that I've talked to there, like it seems like there's some degree of, there had to be some type of cultural reset in the offseason based off that. And even with that said, this Utah team brings back everybody. They didn't have a single early draft selection possibility. Like every single guy came back, every single one. And then you bring in Charlie Brewer, and among the Utah folks that, are in the know, I think you could say, we had Josh Newman from the Trib on the pod earlier in the spring. And he was saying, Witt doesn't talk about quarterbacks the way he talks about Charlie Brewer. And I asked him at media day, is this your guy? And it seemed like it was taking him a lot to not say it outright and say, well, he's got to compete with Cam Rising and he's got to earn his keep the way we do. This is the way our program runs. But he kind of started veering into that territory of like, he's made as good, maybe the best, transition a transfer has like made here. And I think for a kid who's like an 8,000 yard career passer, he showed his flashes at Baylor before Oklahoma literally took his head off in the conference championship game last year. Like Utah's always needed a good quarterback. If they have a good quarterback, there's enough on that team that I really like him coming out of the South.
This isn't a hot take. This is just a comment in which I say, I think the Pac-12 South is maybe as open as I've ever seen it right now.
Oh, yeah.
I talked about how bad Arizona is. I think the thing that stands out is that you go 1 through 5, and I'm going to include Colorado here because I'm going to let you be a homer, Andrew, even though I think
Eric.
I think there's a discrepancy from 1 through 4 to 5 at Colorado, but that's just my own personal thing.
We'll take tier 1.5.
Yeah, they're on tier whatever you want to call it. I don't even know what the tier system is, but I really do think, like, you look at USC, and I picked USC, by the way, to win the conference, as did the Pac-12 South, as did the coaches and media. I don't know what the heck's going on in their offensive line, and I don't think their defense is particularly good. I look at Arizona State and I go, am I totally misreading the room here on Jaden Daniels? Because everyone sort of thinks he's not as good as I think he is. And I think maybe the only reason I think he's very good is based on what he did against Oregon in 2019.
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing a lot of people detract from Arizona State, which going after last season, and at least after the way they beat Arizona and what they bring back, I kind of thought they would be getting a little more buzz. I thought they'd be a top 25 team in the coaches poll. That came out a couple of days ago. And I think they were 28th or something, just off the beat. So, and then you've got Utah and UCLA, who I think Utah is, like you said, everyone's back. The quarterback thing at a lot of these schools is kind of interesting, but I'm with you. I think the Pac-12 South is pretty open, which leads me to my second hot take, to the team I haven't mentioned, which is my real dark horse team to win the division, which is UCLA.
Ah, yes. Figured we'd get there at some point.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it's just the Chip Kelly believer in me that still thinks this is going to work at some point. Because I watched Chip Kelly at Oregon. I covered some of those teams right out of college. Like the first thing I did was cover Chip Kelly coached Oregon teams, which was real trial by fire of, hey, I'm going to ask a question today, and he's just not going to basically acknowledge I asked it or just argue the semantics.
Call you an idiot.
Basically, and I'm like, cool, this is a great way to jump in here. And then we were treated to Mark Helfer, which was a little different from a media perspective. But what I'll say is, like, so there's that component with Chip, and then there's also, I went out and I watched, this is a bit of a digression before we get into it, but just we're on a podcast, this is what we do. Yeah. I went and watched Chip Kelly's first professional game when he was with the Eagles that counted. It was a regular season game against the Washington Redskins. And that offense actually looked really good. So I was like, he's going to be a star in the NFL. And then he wasn't. And now he's been at UCLA. And every year I'm like, it's going to work. And it hasn't. And I'm just, for some reason, I'm clinging to this like notion that some point this will work out for him and that the talent will get there. I do think from a roster perspective, like they're good. Like I like what they have offensively. Their defensive front, I think a lot comes back. I know they lost a couple guys to the NFL, but like that was a really good run defense a year ago. They had a lot of good, I thought, defensive backs too. Like, I mean, maybe not star guys, but it just seemed like it was tough to move the ball downfield against them. So like, I kind of like them, as my dark horse to win the Pac-12 South. And here's why it's a pretty hot take, is that they have the hardest schedule in the conference by a pretty wide margin. Besides like Stanford, they play everybody that's good basically. And they play most of those games on the road. They do host Oregon. They do host Arizona State, but they go to Utah, they go to Stanford, they go to Washington, and then they go to USC. So it's a hot take. I think it's a hotter take than the Arizona losing out take, because for it to happen, it has to break the right way. And it requires them winning some really, like 4 really tough games on the road against teams we think are going to be really good. So give me the Fighting Chip Kellys. I will say I'm wary of the schedule, but like, I like, this feels like the moment. It is either going to work. Like the proof of concept either happens now or it just never happens. And maybe just as Chip's last year if it doesn't work.
I was about to say, I feel like this is very much the put up or shut up year for him. Because like it, and you can't use a DTR injury as an excuse. I know he's hurt right now or has been unavailable in certain respects during fall camp so far, but you can't use him as the be all end all. You know, this is not
just a quick addendum on the point you just made. If DTR is not available, I feel a lot less confident.
Oh God, yeah. No,
go ahead.
Yeah, but even still, like it's, this isn't, I'll put it this way. UCLA is not relying on DTR the way like that 2007 Oregon team was with Dennis Dixon, where like Dennis blows his knee, then tries to play in the next game at Arizona, actually blows it in full. And then the whole season is basically done. If DTR goes down, you can still salvage something. I mean, we saw little bits of Chase Griffin in that Oregon game where it was like, well, okay, this kid can kind of, he can play, he can do it. But if you're Chip Kelly, you also, from a perspective of like, what have you done for us lately? It's an issue of, if DTR is your be all end all, what have you been doing this entire time? Who have you been recruiting and developing this entire time beneath him? If this is all going to start and stop with him. And I think there's actually a lot of talent on that team. Like I love their running back room. I think their running back room might be one of the better ones in the conference between Charbonnet and Britton Brown. Like they've got some dudes there. I think Dulcich is an amazing tight end. I don't know a ton about their receiver room.
It's younger group. It
is younger. And then Quantrez Knight on the defensive side of the ball is like probably top 5 DB in the conference. I think maybe top 3. I mean, he's nice. He was really nice last year as well. That is hot, man. Cause like, I feel like as we get hotter, the other person is going to like slowly get into these points of being like, you're nuts. Like I'm gonna have to tell you why you're nuts here. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm taking it up on my third one or not, but you mentioned Utah winning the South. So I thought it was a natural transition to let's go Bruins. Let's go Fighting Chip Kellys. Honestly, I like it. Cause here's the thing. They've talked and he's talked how many times over the last couple of years about like, we're so young. We're one of the youngest. Like, I feel like coaches hedge that all the time, where they're like, we're young. We got so many freshmen. We have more freshmen than da-da-da. We have more sophomores than da-da-da. Well, he doesn't have that anymore. Like that freshman class that he talked about that they had to strip mine after he got there, like they're upperclassmen now. There's no excuses left. So that's, yeah, I do like that as a potential dark horse though. I think if Utah's my dark horse to win the entire conference, I could ride with the take of UCLA being the dark horse to win the South.
They're interesting, and at some point this either has to work or not work. So preseason storylines, we got to at least throw out some Chip Kelly love.
Yeah. Oh, always, man. A funny aside about Chip. So my first Pac-12 media day a few years ago, it was his first year at UCLA, and I remember asking him, like, how is the defensive complexion in the Pac-12 changed? Because at the time, it was a lot of defensive-minded coaches that were in those positions in the conference. Like it was Shaw, it was Peterson, it was Wilcox, Herm had just come, it was Witt. And so you're looking at all these guys and you're like, these are much more defensive-minded coaches than maybe in his first go-round, where there was this whole discussion of everyone kind of chasing him in his offense by fighting offense with more offense. And I remember I said, do you think that the defensive quality in this league is better now, or defensive philosophy is better now than it was? And he literally looks at me, he goes, it's laughably wrong. And I'm like sitting there with the mic and I'm like, how?
What do I say? What's my follow-up?
Exactly. I was like, what do I say to this? And he just like kind of looks at me with like that deadpan like way that he does it with folks when he doesn't like a question that he's asked, and like gives me like two more one-word answers. And I'm like, dude, actually like tell me this. And he gives me this diatribe that essentially concludes with, but you'd know if you watched the league. And I was like, oof, that was a burn from Chip.
You got the Chip Kelly treatment more than I ever got the Chip Kelly treatment, in part because I never really wanted to get the full Chip Kelly treatment. So I didn't go very aggressively. I saw everybody else take it on the chin and I didn't really want to take it.
Well, the problem is like, I feel like we all do this where it's like, I don't want to be the guy that like gets got by the coach. Like, I feel like after a few years in our career, like you come in early and like, you're very deferential, right? Cause you're just like, you're like scared if you ask like the wrong question, like, oh, they're going to take my credential, like,
well, my access
or like this coach is never going to talk to me. Like, then you get to the point where you like become an adult and you're like, you're not going to talk to me like that, but then you reach certain coaches who are like, I don't care. I'm going to treat you that way anyway, which we talk the line. It's fine.
I just think it's nice that at Oregon, for the most part, you get well thought out, reasonable answers to reasonable questions.
I agree.
What I'll say. If you ask a good question, you get a good answer.
Well, that's kind of the line, not to like get all media critiquey here, but like, I feel like the line at certain points is like when you start to give unreasonable answers to reasonable questions. Like, I understand calling a bad question out as a bad question, but if it's a good question, you shouldn't be calling it out like that. So that was my media hot take.
Can I tag on to it and just say, I've also been on the receiving end of coaches texting me to let me know they liked the question and wish they'd give me a better answer. So from Oregon coaches, which is the all-time thank you so much. That makes me feel good.
I love that. That's a subtle flex. I love that subtle flex out of you. All right. So let's see where we're going from here now. We've got your two. I've got my second. My second hot take. Cal is going to be the second best team in the Pac-12 North, and they're going to win 9 or 10 games.
Ooh.
And I say that because I like Bill Musgrave. I like his offenses. And I think, like it is with Chip, I think for the offensive players at Cal, for Chase Garbers and a lot of those upperclassmen, this is very much their put up or shut up year. And talking to Chase in LA, I kind of said, like, do you feel like you guys haven't pulled your weight over the last few years? I dressed it up a little bit nicer than that, but
good.
Yeah. But that was kind of the gist of the question was, are you aware of what the opinion is of Cal football right now, which is they will beat you 14-7 because they can't score but they are great on defense. And he basically said, we haven't been pulling our weight and we're planning on changing that this year. We weren't able to do. And I think, and I've asked so many people at this point, because I do think it is an underreported storyline for a lot of coaching staffs that were new last year, is proper installs, man. Like this year, it has to be a night and day difference for coaches, for players to be able to be in the rooms together, to be able to interact with one another, to actually be on the field, to do these things in a different way and ingest film in a different way. Like the installs have to be totally different. And so I'd imagine if you're Cal and you're a Cal player on that offensive side of the ball, the install with Musgrave right now has to have been night and day this entire offseason. So I think if you're playing that vanilla last year, I think Cal's got the offensive talent. I think there's plenty of really good recruits that they've pulled up in the last couple of years. Good recruiting class in the wide receiver room. I think in 2020, or it was a 21 with Sturdivant and a couple of those 4-star guys that were like high 3, 20. Low 4 fringe guys. Yeah, 20. I think there's enough talent kind of in there. I think Garbers is ready to take another step. And if you were that vanilla in the first year, I feel like you have the chance in the first 4 weeks to catch some people by surprise, because no one's going to be ready for what a full Musgrave install looks like. They're going to be digesting NFL tape, trying to see what they do. And it goes both ways. Like same deal for Oregon, like Moorhead's offense and Zach Hill's at Arizona State. Those offenses could look totally different as well in the opening few weeks. But I think there's something in particular with Cal where there's something about them. And frankly, and this is going to sound homerish because of where we are and who we cover, I don't buy the Washington hype. And so if there isn't a Washington hype, somebody's got to occupy that secondary spot in the conference, or in the division rather. And I think that's going to be Cal. I think it's going to be Cal. And I think they're going to be like a 9-10 win team.
I like the logic a lot of Cal. Washington, I'm not sure of as a real contender this year. I don't even know what to make of the 2020 season for anybody, but Washington in particular didn't play away from home. So it's like, how do we really, and a lot of those teams that were visiting were teams that thought they were hosting the game, not a lot, but a couple of them going into the week. So it's like, they had some advantages their way. I'll put it that way. And I'm just like, not sure what they have at quarterback. I actually think, I think Sam Heward's going to be good eventually. I don't think it's right now. And I don't think Dylan Morris is that great. By the way, which makes me go back to Cal. I don't know if I've ever flip-flopped on a quarterback as many times as it's been with Chase Garbers. Like I thought
that's very fair.
I thought he had a noodle arm when he was like a freshman, and then it's so hard to remember which year it was. 2019, I watched him against Ole Miss. I watched that whole game because it was right before Oregon played, I think, at Stanford. And I watched that whole game, and I was like, he's really impressive. I think he threw for like over 300 yards in that game. And then like it was either the end of that game or the next week, he got hurt, knocked out, and then never really returned to form. Cal wasn't very good. And then last year's game, I know Cal won the game. I didn't think Garbers was very impressive in that game. So I don't know what to believe with Cal, with Garbers, which is part of why I'm kind of like not sure on them. I could see them being really, really good. I could see them struggling a little bit just because I don't know about Garbers. But I also will say this, Andrew, I've looked through the quarterbacks in this league. I'm not confident in anybody, really. You look at who's brought back. I think Garbers and Daniels are legitimately, along with Slovis, like the only quarterbacks that started every game last season that we know for sure are the starters this year. Mm-hmm. I mean, you've got quarterbacks throughout the conference, their schools throughout the conference that either lost their quarterback or bring their quarterback back, but may start somebody else. So the quarterback situations across the conference, I know it's not a hot take, but just an observation. I don't know what to make. I mean, that's what makes kind of calling some of these conference races tough, and why I think we're having these discussions is like, it's not a year where you bring back 7 conference quarterbacks and all of them are starters and all of them are good. I have no idea how to forecast like the first or second team all conference quarterback thing. Like I think Keaton Slovis is probably up there, and I still remain a Jaden Daniels fan a little bit just based on the Oregon-Arizona State game. But you could convince me that it's going to be a quarterback from a ton of schools. Like Stanford has Tanner McKee, who was a 5-star recruit. I watched him at the opening the same year as Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields. He was he was a tier below them, but not by a lot. The same camp Tyler Shuck was at. Mm-hmm. He was in a Mormon mission for 2 years. He came back last year. He actually threw his only passes of the season, I think, against Oregon in the game where Davis Mills was out. But he's a super talent. Like I could be an NFL arm there. And that's a quarterback that nobody's talking about in the conference, and a team no one's talking about much in the conference. So there's a bunch of different guys like that where you go, you mentioned Charlie Brewer at Utah. You go like, maybe he could be first team all conference.
I was about to say, like, it's a weird situation at quarterback in the conference when the Baylor transfer, like you're looking at and you're like, he like on his face right now could be like one of the top 3 quarterbacks in this conference. That's wild.
If we're going to make it Oregon centric, which I'm about to with my 3rd pick,
right.
But like Anthony Brown came from Boston College. He was never an all conference quarterback at all. And honestly, I think he was hurt too much to really make much of a point on this, but probably wasn't a top 3rd in the conference quarterback at all in the ACC. And yet he comes out to Oregon, and there's a chance he ends up being, if my next prediction comes true, the conference is like 1st or 2nd team all conference guy.
Before we go to the 3rd, I want the quick interlude while we build up suspense, because you mentioned Stanford. And I don't know what to make of them anymore. Like I know in recruiting circles, you guys have talked a lot about how the early signing period really, really hurt them because of their admission process and standard. And so all of these 4 and 5 star guys that like they used to hit, 5-6 years ago, they're not hitting anymore because the kids just, they can't wait, like they want to get in and gray shirt and enroll early. And Stanford forces them to kind of hang and sit around. And so they lose out on a lot of talent that way. But is there a road that you see for Stanford to be a top tier team again? Or are they an 8-win ceiling team from here on out because of what recruiting's done to them?
So I actually predicted they would finish 3rd in the North.
Really?
I did that
with what record though? Like an 8-4 or higher than that?
I have to go pull up what I predicted overall. I think I did have them losing to Northwestern early because I know that's a game on their schedule. Let me see if I can find this really fast because this is something I did a little bit ago. I think I had them 8-4, 5-3, if I remember right.
Okay, that makes
something
sense.
like that. Somewhere in that range. But let me see if I can. That doesn't actually add up, does it? 8-4, 5. It had to be 6-3 or 5-4. Let me see if I can figure this out really fast here, what I predicted.
Math isn't our strong suit, man. It's all right.
I'm usually pretty good at math. That's one of the things I pride myself on, but apparently not at this moment here. Here we go. I found it. Okay, so let's see. What did I predict? I can actually even tell you which games I have them winning and losing because I know I included that. I had Stanford going 7-5 overall, with 1 loss in non-conference play. So, 5-4. I have them beating... Sorry, not Northwestern. That was who they played a couple of years ago. I've been beating Kansas State, Vanderbilt, UCLA, Washington State, Washington, Oregon State, and Cal, losing to USC, Oregon, Arizona State, Utah, and Nevada. If you're paying attention at home, you notice that's all the good teams in the conference. And similar to UCLA, Stanford just plays everyone good, which is why it's kind of hard to predict. Like not only do they play everyone well, which is the proper way of saying that they perform well on the field, they also play all the good teams, which is what I was trying to communicate a second ago in the conference. So like that's why it's kind of hard to predict with Stanford. So I have optimism with them, but I also do think, like they feel like an 8 or 9 win ceiling team just because I don't think they have the talent they used to. And it used to be a thing where you would go back and look at it and they would have all the 5-star offensive linemen. And this might be a little bit of a byproduct of the Mario Cristobal experience too, of he comes out here and maybe he's, maybe the Josh Garnett's of the world. And I'm trying to think of a couple of Foster Sorrells of the world.
Sorrell, and then who was the
all
other?
These 5-star kids.
Walker Little,
all of these 5-star kids they've landed, and Little was Texas. The other 2 were California and Washington, so they're regional. Oregon, I guess, has done well in Texas, but these are the kids that end up going to Oregon now that maybe went to Stanford. So that could be playing into it. But I think where you see it more than anything is skill position. And at running back, God, think about the running backs they had there under Shaw during, when they were the heart of the runs, whether it was a Christian McCaffrey or a Bryce Love. Toby Gerhart was before that. I don't think he played for Shaw as head coach. He was maybe Shaw was a coordinator, but
Harbaugh,
the Harbaugh guy. But they had so many talented running backs. I don't think you see that year in and year out. And I think that's something that I've noticed that distinguishes them from previous Stanford teams that are competing for, playoff spots or conference championships at least.
I like it. All right. Ghost Pepper Carolina Reaper take, baby. What do we got?
Okay, so this is definitely going against my Oregon predictions. I will say off the top here, and actually I'm just going to promote the site. You can go to duckterritory.com, and I do have my season predictions. It was posted on July 21st, so you might have to do some scrolling or just search Erik Skopil Pac-12 predictions. I have Oregon going 9-3 and 7-2 in Pac-12 play. I have them losing games to Ohio State, UCLA, and Utah. So no win, all wins at home, all losses on the road. I'm going to make a prediction here that goes counter to that because it is the hot take show. And I'm going to predict Oregon becomes the first team in Pac-12 history and only the second school ever in Pac-10/Pac-12 history to go 9-0 in a conference season, joining another Oregon team, which is currently the only team to do so, which was in 2010, the year before they went to 12 schools. It's kind of a wild stat. They had been they were like 3-year window where they were the Pac-10. They played 9 games. Maybe it was 5. Before that, they always played 8. So there's only been one team to ever go 9-0, and it was Oregon in 2010. Unless my data is off and I'm missing some years. Andrew frantically typing to fact check me.
I was going to say, just typing away.
But either way, like my point is, this has not happened very often. I do think that if Oregon takes that step and is the team that we think it can be as a actual college football playoff contender, that the conference is open for a team to just run through it. And I think Oregon could be that team this year. And a lot of this is going to be dependent upon quarterback, and some of it's going to be dependent upon cornerback and defensive back right now because of some of the indefinite suspensions being served. How long and how impactful are the losses of Jamal Hill and DJ James? Those are important defensive backs. But ultimately, I just think the talent is so dang good, Andrew. And I'm trying to think if I said this on a previous show or not. Wow. I'm sort of convinced that the current Oregon team has the most talented roster Oregon has ever had. And if that's true, which I'm hedging my bets a little here because we'll see. If that's true, I think they could really do some damage this year. And I don't think there's a team in the conference that like I think will knock Oregon off. So there's my hottest prediction of the show. Oregon goes 9-0 in Pac-12 play and probably plays in the college football playoff if that's the case.
I like it. Mine's going to be even more on the sunshine than that.
Oh boy.
The Pac-12 wins 75% of its Power 5 non-conference games. Yeah.
Right on.
I feel, all right, now, I think there's a legitimate case here, first of all, because I am extraordinarily bullish on this particular year in the Pac-12. This has, to me, a bit of like a Pac-12 men's basketball going into March vibe to it, okay. Where well, like I think over the last couple of years it hasn't been marketed to the point where it's like all these teams are ready to pop, but I think there's been a small improvement in conference recruiting in certain schools that need to be the ones to win, right? And I think that you can beat up on each other in conference as long as you win in the non-con. Now I'm looking at the schedule here and I see, an Oregon State versus a Purdue or a Stanford, Kansas State. Those kinds of games I look at as like for like Power 5 matchups, which I think the conference really needed to do more of in the last few years. And I think what's killed the conference's perception, I think, is that they didn't do enough of these. They did a lot of G5, FCS, and then like Power 5 versus top of Power 5. And the top of the Power 5 would kill them. And then they beat the G5 or FCS, in some cases lose to the G5. And people would be like, oh, like this doesn't matter. Why is this important? And if you get these games, Washington, Michigan, which you could argue is top third, maybe not top 2 or top half, but top third of their respective conferences, Holy War, Utah, BYU, Cal, TCU. That's another one of just like, what you would argue is like mid-tier top third of their respective conferences. Like those are the games that you need on the schedule, but I think they're poised to win a lot of them. Like I think you could look, if I'm looking at weeks 1 through 3 here, right? Stanford and Vanderbilt, I feel like that's a Stanford win.
I do too.
Colorado, Minnesota, I think Colorado has a shot. I think people are sleeping on Brendan Lewis a little bit, and I think Colorado's not going to drop all those games out of the non-con because I'm a bit of a Carl Durrell homer where I think he's one of these guys where he coaches talent better than he recruits. And so there will come a time when the recruiting will catch him, but I think he based on what he got on the back end of the Mike Mack and the 1 year of Mel Tucker, I think he's a guy that can outcoach what his talent is. So I think they're not going to beat A&M, but I think they beat Minnesota. I think there's a case to be made that they can beat a Minnesota. I think Cal can beat a TCU. I think that Washington has a shot against a team like Michigan, provided there's an understanding about what that quarterback position looks like, whether it's Morris or Heward or Patrick O'Brien, the CSU transfer. Oregon, Ohio State. Do we know what Ohio State's quarterback situation is right now? Are we sure?
It's gonna be CJ Stroud. Now you can probably convince me that a 5-star quarterback in his second start might not be that great.
That's my thought though. Is I think a lot of people, when they look at that particular schedule game on the schedule, they're like, well, this is going to look like what they looked like last year with Fields. No, it could look like what Oklahoma looked like with Spencer Rattler in big games last year. And Spencer Rattler is a damn good quarterback, but Spencer Rattler had a couple of welcome to college football moments. And he, as whether it's Stroud or McCord or any of the other guys that they have in that quarterback room, they could be due for a welcome to college football moment. Colorado and A&M, that'd be a little bit of a stretch.
Let's just continue moving on. Let's just move on.
As would UCLA, LSU. I think that's the other game I would take off the board and say, that would be a huge, like a monumentally huge upset. But I think Oregon State matches up well with a team like Purdue. I think Purdue is maybe middling at best with Braum. I don't really know who they have on that team that really sticks out and stands out. And I think Oregon State, with the transfers they've been able to get in the Power Five across the last couple of years, I think you're starting to see fruit on that side of things. And I'm curious to see if it ends up being Sam Neuer as their starting quarterback. Arizona, BYU, maybe we wipe that one off the slate as well. That's in our 25%. But who knows? Maybe Pac-12 John Stewart, a.k.a. Jed Fish, will surprise me a little bit. Also, he sounds like Jon Stewart too. I don't know if you've noticed that.
I haven't. You would know better the Jonathan Stewart tenor than I would, having
he sounds and looks like him, which is why I'm also very much rooting for him. But Stanford, Kansas State, another situation of teams that are like 7-8 win teams. Kleiman against Shaw, that's like a great, just schematic, like gritty coach battle, I think. But all of those games, to me, they all on the schedule look winnable. And I understand the variance of everything that can happen to assume that all those games on that slate will be. But I think more than any other year in the past 5, at least for me, I look at that schedule and I go, I think all of those teams have a shot or better to win those respective games, just based on the fact that the matchups seem even, and all these teams, in regards to where they are in the rest of the college football hierarchy, never mind the Pac-12, I think a lot of those teams are ones that are ready to make some semblance of a jump up. I don't know about Stanford, but I think Cal and Utah are ready to make their respective jumps. I think Oregon State is ready to be bowl eligible. I think Oregon is ready to make that playoff adjacent type of push with the top teams in the Power Five. I mean, it feels like this year is one of those years where it might just catch some people. And so I think 75% of the non-cons will be won by Pac-12 teams. The hot take.
I really like that, Andrew. I hadn't identified the scheduling issue that you pointed out, and that you pointed that out. I think it's a really good one. I mean, you think of what teams have scheduled in the past in the Pac-12. I think of UCLA. It seems like, why are we playing Oklahoma? Why are you playing like these games you're just never going to win? Like, even this year, like, why are you playing LSU? What's the purpose of that game? It's one of the best teams in another conference, and you're middle of the Pac-12 at best. So, but if you're going to try to measure like the Pac-12, I mean, this is something that actually bugs me, and I'd actually would like to see data done on, would be like, how is the Pac-12 done in games that they were favored going into non-conference wise, and how have they done in games that they were under, and that they were underdogs?
That's a good deep dive, actually.
Because Andrew, I think you're probably right that the Pac-12 has probably justifiably so been underdogs in a lot of these games, because they choose to go and, like the middle of the conference or the back end of the conference just seems to choose they want to play teams that are near the top of other conferences. And that's fine and good. And hey, that's great for the Pac-12 if Oklahoma goes down to UCLA in September. that's gonna move the needle an awful lot. But more like 9 out of 10 times that's not happening. Probably more than that. And so, like, schedule some teams you can actually beat from other conferences, because I don't think it's as simple to say like the Pac-12 is not as good as the Big 10, Big 12, SEC, ACC. I want to see these teams actually match up on the field, and kind of like what we see with the crossover in basketball, have the teams that are evenly matched face each other, have the top teams face each other, and have the middle face each other and the bottom face each other.
Okay, so I have the 2019 schedule up here for the Pac-12. So you had Arizona, Hawaii, Kent State, Arizona State, Utah, BYU week 0. Utah, BYU is the rivalry. You had an Oregon State team in year 2 of Jonathan Smith going to an Oklahoma State team that had Chuba Hubbard, Spencer Sanders, and Tylan Wallace.
Why schedule that game?
Yeah. What?
Why would you schedule that game?
Exactly. And like, you had Stanford Northwestern, which was an even game. Oregon Auburn, which I would argue was even. G5's the rest of the way up. UCLA Cincinnati won that. G5's the entire third week of the season. Like, there's not a Power 5. I'm like looking at this and I'm like kind of shocked. Colorado, Nebraska, which Colorado won. Like, and then every other game in here, there's a whole lot of nothing. I mean, there's Oklahoma, UCLA, as you had mentioned. And then I guess your only like for likes are like Cal, Ole Miss, Arizona State, Michigan State, Texas Tech, Arizona. Yeah. I mean, like you can count on one hand the quality like for like Power 5 games just in the 2019 sample alone. If
I was just going to say, if you're the national audience and you're watching this, like, the Pac-12 isn't doing itself any favors in how it's scheduling. What are you supposed to be going off of to think the Pac-12 is good? Until the Pac-12 wins the marquee matchups, that's a key thing. But the other part is like the middle of the conference, I think, just needs to prove its mettle, because I think the middle of the conference is better than a lot of other conferences.
I totally agree. I think that's the pitfall of the conference, is I think the middle is too good. Like, I think there's an argument to be made in here that the middle of the conference comes together too late every single year. Like they don't do enough in the non-con. They start to coalesce in like week 7. And then if you go look at the bowl schedule since that like one disastrous year where they went like 1-7, like they've been above 500 every year in bowl games since. Right. So it's not as if, and they're up in the top 3. I think I actually, let me find this off air. Like I had a tweet that broke down like 3 or 4 years worth of bowl schedules relative to the rest of the Power 5. And they were one of the 3 best conferences every single year in terms of wins and win percentage.
I don't think this stuff gets talked about nationally enough. And I don't know if it's just out of lethargy or lack of desire to really point to it, but like the narrative of the Pac-12 is like an afterthought conference is I think a little bit of a lazy one. And I am hopeful that we will see more concerted efforts to be, and this is what one of the things that George Kliavkoff did say on his Pac-12 media day press conference was just the fact that they're making decisions with trying to win championships, and some of that will have to do with scheduling. And I think one thing that really will help the conference out is if they go to 8 conference games.
Yeah. The ninth is a killer. The ninth
is a killer. Change the non-conference. I think Andrew and I've made some good points, and Andrew in particular brought up good points in terms of you want the middle of the conference to face the middle of other conferences rather than the middle facing the top of other conferences. That's a kind of a no-win proposition for the league. But the other part is take away a conference game. The SEC does it. It helps. You get more teams bowl eligible. You have a free win game at some. I mean, you can, if you schedule like the SEC does, you'd have a free win game in November at some point, which just helps everybody's win total. And I think that is going to be something that will help the league a lot. And I do think from a scheduling perspective, there's a lot that they can do to make this work better. And I hope we see a lot of this come to fruition. And these aren't empty promises from the top, because I actually was, I don't know if you were too, Andrew, but I was actually pretty impressed with some of the things he said about 2 weeks ago.
I think he's a pretty forward-thinking guy. And I think he has a pretty acute understanding of what this conference needs. And frankly, what it needs is somebody that just gives a rip, like that's like, it's amazing how low the bar is, but like they need someone who just cares. And he seems to care, and I'll take that. And I think we care too.
We care too. We care a little bit too much.
Which is
why we want our commissioners to care. Yeah. We want the commissioner to care because there's a lot of people who actually do care. and having a commissioner for a very long time, who shall not be named. He's like Voldemort on this.
Yeah, really?
I don't want to mention his name. Maybe just because he'll come back and run the conference more, but it just felt like there was just a long time where it just felt like that no steps were being made to actually benefit the league, which is the last thing you want from the person whose sole job is to find a way to make things work for the league's favor.
Yeah, especially in a time when it was apparent everybody else was doing that. Yeah. Everybody else was moving forward with it. So brave new world, Erik. You brought the heat today, my friend.
Thank you. I think you did as well. I thought that was some good. I thought we were pretty fiery here.
Yeah, no, we brought it. At least I would like to think so. We'll see what the listeners say when we do the survey for next week. Where can we find you on the socials, man? Where can we also find the work?
Took a sip of water just to cool off because I was just unfuego over here. You can find me at Erik_Skopil, SKOP as in Paul IL on social, at Duck Territory for all my content. Lots of podcasts, odds and audibles podcasts, lots of written stuff, insider stuff, VIP stuff, all those sorts of things. And if you do want to be a subscriber at duckterritory.com, go check it out. We've got all sorts of deals that we're running. And if you have questions on those deals, go ahead and direct message me on Twitter. Am I asking people to do that on my podcast? Ballsy move, Erik, but we'll see what happens.
Wow, that's egregious. But you know what? I love the moxie, man. I love the moxie. Erik, thanks a ton, bud.
All right. Thanks so much, Andrew.